this guy from Scotland is better than some guy from Plainview, wherever, in the United States as a coach because he's from Scotland.
Yeah.
Now, don't mind the fact that Scotland hasn't made the World Cup in God knows when.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is. It's because he's from Europe, he's better than anyone else that could be in the United States. And I think that there's maybe some truth to that, simply because overall development within the United States isn't very good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're paying these coaches from overseas. So that's where all this money's coming from. It's not even necessarily traveling costs, which I was shocked by. I thought that's what the vast majority of it would be. And so when we're talking about a situation like that, where parents have to fork out thousands of dollars over, 5 years to get their kids even noticed, I can see why the NCAA is the way it is. I can see why the lower leagues are the way they are, because it's just impossible to find decent talent and get it filtered to where it needs to go. Yeah. I also learned that scouting is horrendous. On the national team level, there are only a handful of scouts for the entire country. Yeah. And when you consider how big our country is, a handful, and I'm not joking, it's like under 10. Yeah. That's just shocking. How can they be that many places at once to pick out talent?
Well, there's not too many, but on the flip side of that, there aren't too many soccer hotbeds in the United States.
I would agree, yeah.
I mean, it's not like baseball where guys are getting scouted from, North region. So you got a guy who goes from Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, that type of thing. If there's a scout up here for soccer, he's probably only hitting up Minnesota. Right. He's probably not hitting North Dakota. He's probably not hitting South Dakota because they don't play soccer. I mean, they might, but they don't play soccer like we do here in North Dakota and South Dakota. They play baseball, they play football, they play basketball. They don't play soccer.
Right.
It's not a... I think a lot to do with Minnesota having a pretty big soccer following is the fact that we have a lot of immigrants here. We have a lot of Somalians. We have a lot of people from other countries who come here who love soccer. And I think we have a history of it. I mean, going back to the 70s and early 80s with the Kicks? I think it was the Kicks.
And Strikers.
Kicks and Strikers. So we have a following of it. And when I was a kid, if you didn't play baseball in the summertime, you played soccer. Or those are the two options you had. I think in a lot of places, kids don't even play soccer. So it's more of I think it's more of a, it's not as widespread as it is in Europe. European kids play soccer or basketball. Those are two things.
Yeah, that's true. And I think what's interesting is you brought up the immigrant situation, where there are a lot of immigrants who tend to be overlooked. And now I don't know what the reason is for that. I'm not going to speculate as to what.
It's not a political podcast, Dave.
Right. So why that is, who knows? But the reality is, it happens. I mean, if you look at, and I'll commend Minnesota United, if you look at their current academy, which is only 2 teams right now, there are actually a very solid number of immigrants.
Yes.
Or at least immigrant names. I suppose they may not be immigrants themselves. And so that's kind of interesting because, as you said, Minnesota has a lot of immigrants. Yes. And soccer is generally the most accepted sport around the world, regardless of where you are.
Yes.
So the fact that they don't reach out to communities, specifically the Hispanic communities.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is pretty surprising. And I don't know if that's necessarily so much of an issue on the MLS side. It definitely is on the U.S. soccer side.
Yes.
And that's been talked about at pretty significant lengths in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. And they don't seem to be doing a whole lot about it, which is kind of surprising.
But how much do you think that goes into the... We'll get a little political here. But how much of that do you think has to do with the climate right now against immigration? Do you think there's some people who are scared to maybe go out for teams or maybe do anything with soccer, even baseball, because they're afraid to get deported or whatever?
I mean, it's possible. I think I am trying to avoid getting super political with this comment. But, there was the story about that team in Idaho just a couple months ago. In fact, Minnesota United is trying to, the supporter groups are trying to get them to the U.S. Open Cup here, or what do they call it? Schwann's Cup. And it was a situation where this guy was coaching in Boise.
Yep.
And his team was almost all immigrants. And he was dealing with racism like none other. I mean, he's a white guy, and he's getting these hate letters and threats against him and his family for coaching a team of mostly immigrant players in Boise, Idaho. Mm-hmm. Now, is that something that would have happened 4 years ago? I don't know. And I think the overall political climate within the United States, as you said, against immigration is a big issue.
Yes.
We, for instance, United they just welcomed 3 players into their camp, finally, who have been now signed for, Pangop has been signed for, I think, almost 2 months now. Echo is probably a little over a month, and Fernando, I think, is within the last few weeks, and they're just now coming in to the roster because it was taking them so long to get their visas.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's... I've never been involved in that process, so I don't know if 2 months, for instance, for Pangop is normal, but to me that seems like it seems a little long.
I think it depends on the sport, and it depends on the player. I mean, you look at Otani, the guy from Japan, who's going to start playing in the MLB this year. I'm pretty sure he got his stuff together within like a week. And I'm sure the Angels, because they pay so much money for him, said, we're going to get this through, and they got connections or whatever.
Right.
Whereas a team like the United, I don't think they have those type of connections. I don't think they're going to pay that kind of money to get guys fast-tracked through.
Right.
And it might be a political thing. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, and I suppose the country of origin could be an issue too. Yeah. I mean, Fernando obviously got through pretty quickly, and now my mind's blanking as to where he's from. I think he's Colombia. Mm-hmm. Where Pangop and Echo are from Africa, so Cameroon to be exact.
Sure.
So there might be a chance that Cameroon may have a slightly lower, interest from immigration officers to move things forward.
Sure.
That's my thought.
Yeah.
I think if it was somebody from, say, Algeria, I bet it would take even longer.
Yeah, probably.
Or if it was a Syrian player, I bet it would never happen.
A Syrian player would take forever.
Right. So, I think there's some of that stuff involved. And, I think it's probably pretty crazy to not think that politics play at least some level.
But it's one of this is the only sport in the United States that has that type of issue, because you look at football, nobody's coming from any other countries to play American football. Okay,
unless they're a kicker.
I mean, kickers, from Mexico usually. Sometimes from Europe. Gary Anderson from South Africa. Mm. You look at baseball, Dominican countries. You're looking at Puerto Rico. You're looking at South America, stuff like that. Some Europeans, Max Kepler, love that kid. But I mean, not much. Basketball, mostly America. Some European guys. And some Asians, coming over from Japan or China. But if you look at soccer as a whole, everybody in the world plays soccer. So you're bringing guys in from every part of the world.
Right.
And with our current political situation, bringing in guys from all over the world, doesn't really kind of jive with the political situation. It doesn't jive.
Right. It doesn't.
And that's one of what's probably going to be one of the issues if this political situation continues. But let's move on to what the United have coming up here. I think it's next week. Who are we playing next week, Dave?
Next week is New York Red Bulls.
The Red Bulls.
Which is probably the hardest game that they're going to have. Well, I guess Atlanta's next week.
Yeah.
I think they're harder than Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Red Bulls. I mean, who they got? I'm not too up with who the Red Bulls have, so.
Yeah, I'm not either. So, Red Bulls right now, they're currently in Champions League play.
Really?
And they're killing it.
Wow.
And I am trying to waste time
because you're looking it up on your phone.
As I look on my phone.
See, everybody who's listening to this right now, I mean, Dave's a huge soccer fan. He doesn't even know some of this stuff. I am kind of just I like soccer, but I'm not into it as much as Dave is. Soccer is so all-encompassing that you can't even remember what's going on with half the teams. You know, I remember as a kid when I was a big baseball fan. As a kid, I could name the starting 9 for most teams in the American League. That's how devoted to baseball I was. Now you try to ask me that question, I couldn't even. I could name the Twins, maybe. I might be able to do the Cubs. You know, maybe some bigger teams, maybe the Yankees, because I hear about them on ESPN all the time. But I can't remember them anymore, you know? There's so much stuff going on with these teams, you know?
Yeah, so they're big guy, and I did not have to look this up. Yeah. It just happens to coincide with me finding it. Their big guy is Wright Phillips. He's a fantastic goal scorer. And I think in terms of offense, I think he's their big guy. He's an Englander.
They play good soccer over there.
They tend to play at least something that represents somewhat good soccer. They're definitely better than the United States.
Well, they're better than the Italians right now.
Yeah, that's
they're
true.
not even in the World Cup.
And actually, I take that back. I wouldn't say that they're better than the United States.
English soccer's not better than United States soccer.
See, when people think England, they think the Premier League.
Yeah.
But the Premier League is half not English players.
Yeah.
In fact, it might even be higher than that.
Yeah.
In terms of the national team, they're way overrated.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, sure, they have a few good guys.
A couple
that are definitely worth talking about. But overall, I mean, look back to was that the 2010 World Cup that they were in the same group as we were?
I think so.
We finished tied points.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
I don't think. In fact, we both got knocked out at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, overall, I wouldn't say that they're superior. I mean, vastly superior to the U.S.
Yeah.
They're better because they have their shit together.
Well, every league in Europe is probably better than us because they have their shit together.
Right. So when I look at it and I say, England may not be significantly better than the U.S., I mean that in a sense that in the grand scheme of things, on any given Sunday, so to speak,
Football reference.
I think when the U.S. is playing up to par, the U.S. can pull a result against England.
Sure.
I don't think in the same situation the U.S. pulls a result against your favorite team, Germany.
I'm not a German fan. I'm an Italian fan. Boys and girls.
Or your favorite team, Italy. I just don't think it happens. I think the fact that England is in the World Cup and Italy isn't is surprising to me.
It's very surprising.
I think the fact that Switzerland, who is the team I'm going to be supporting, is in the World Cup and England isn't, is surprising. But at the same time, it's not that too crazy.
Let's talk about the World Cup for a second because an interesting point here. Do you believe that the United States not being in the next World Cup is going to affect viewership of
No.
the World